Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. And in a week that saw the Matildas become the first Australian football team to reach a World Cup semi-final by beating France in a nerve-wracking penalty shootout at the end of a gripping quarter-final over the weekend, there's also good news for the Albanese government, with several key indicators moving in the right direction. First, the latest Roy Morgan poll shows ALP support up 1% to 54.5 compared to the coalition on 45.5 on a two-party preferred basis. This is the best result for the government since mid-July. Government confidence was up 3 points to 83 this week. And despite the improvement, this is below the neutral level of 100 because more Australians still believe the country is heading in the wrong direction than the right direction. Consumer confidence this week rebounded 3.2 points to 78.2, essentially reversing last week's decrease. And consumer confidence this week was up in Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia, but down slightly in New South Wales. Driving this week's rise was an increase in confidence among Australians about their personal finances compared to a year ago and looking forward over the next year. However, despite this increase, ANZ Roy Morgan consumer confidence has now spent a record 24 weeks below the mark of 80, almost 6 months in recessionary risk territory. There was also good news this week for inflation expectations. Australians are now expecting annual inflation to be 5.2% over each of the next couple of years, down 0.2% on last week. And this is the lowest inflation expectations we've recorded for 3 months since mid-May. Also, this week we have the results of the latest Roy Morgan survey in collaboration with the Australian Retailers Association, all about Father's Day. The survey shows that spending on Father's Day this year is being hit by the rising cost of living, inflation and interest rates. The forecasts show 7.6 million Australians plan on buying a Father's Day gift of some kind this year and plan to spend an average of $112 on gifts. Now that's down $1 from a year ago. And that will lead to an overall spending of $860 million on the day, down by just over 1% from a year ago, and equal to about 12 million less than a year ago. For Father's Day, by far the most popular gifts are alcohol and food, followed by clothing, shoes, books, music and games. So overall spending on Father's Day at $860 million is set to be about $60 million less than was spent on Mother's Day just 3 months ago in mid-May. And that's rightly so, I would say. Father's Day is held on the first Sunday in September in just over 2 weeks. Now, following on from World Drowning Prevention Day, which the United Nations marked recently, we've had a look at how the country approaches water. The latest figures from the most recent National Drowning Report show 339 Australians drowned in the 12 months to June 22, that's last year, and that was a 15% increase on the year before. Australia's love of swimming is well known, and the latest Roy Morgan figures show that 5 million Australians swim at least occasionally. Unsurprisingly, Australians living in Queensland, Western Australia and New South Wales are far more likely to be swimmers than those in the southern states. And they're also more likely to own swimming pools or spa pools. Nearly 1 in 4 people in regional Queensland, which includes the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Cairns and many other resort towns, have a swimming pool or a spa, almost double the national average of 14%. And the cities with the highest concentration of pools and spas are led by Brisbane on 19%, ahead of Perth on 17% and Sydney on 16%. For the major capital cities, Melbourne is last, with only 9% of people in Melbourne having a pool or a spa. Now, it's the weather, I hear you say. You're probably right, that's true. However, this lack of pools, spas and warm weather hasn't hurt Melbourne's appeal to other Australians. The southern capital is again Australia's most preferred holiday destination. After the pandemic restrictions ended late last year, Melbourne returned to the top position as Australia's preferred travel destination earlier this year. And since then, it's built on that lead in the most recent figures released just today. Now, nearly 3 million Australians, 2,977,000 to be exact, say they would like to spend at least one night in Melbourne on a holiday in the next 2 years. Also rising quickly in popularity is Sydney, that's the green line, which has now overtaken the Gold Coast for second spot. More than 2.9 million nominate the harbour city, Sydney, as a preferred holiday destination ahead of the Gold Coast at 2,647,000. The chart shows that the Gold Coast, that's the red line, benefited significantly from increased travel during the pandemic, particularly from southern states. But with the end of the pandemic, with the end of restrictions and international borders being reopened, the city is now slipping down the rankings. In a clear fourth and fifth are Brisbane and Hobart, with almost 2 million Australians saying they'd like to visit these cities in the next 2 years. 1,963,000 for Brisbane and 1,918,000 for Hobart, just behind. Finally, although Melbourne's regained the top spot, the desire to travel to the Victorian capital, Melbourne, is still below pre-pandemic levels. In contrast, there are more people today saying they'd like to travel to Sydney, Brisbane and Hobart than there were before COVID-19. And that's a wrap for this week. Subscribe to our Roy Morgan YouTube channel. It's free for all of the latest political, economic and market research data and insights. Thanks for listening today. I look forward to bringing you more wonderful information next week. Take care and we'll see you next Tuesday.